Welcome to the Pewter Cast. This is episode 00. My name is Brent Allen, and I am your host. And this is a brand new podcast, y'all. It is a new podcast all about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by a fan for the fans. That's right, guys. This podcast is just for you guys out there who are the fans. Of course, if anybody else wants to take a listen, they're certainly more than welcome. But really, this is for us. I am a fan of the Buccaneers, and this is for other people who are also fans of the Buccaneers. Hey, I'm glad you're here. And this isn't a regular show. If you've come across this particular episode, this is episode what I'm calling 00. This is really sort of the introduction to the show. So it's not really an episode per se, as much as it is just me really kind of introducing the show. We're going to be talking about what the show is going to be about and how we're going to kind of do things and just sort of stuff like that. That's really all this particular episode is. This will be a very unpolished episode. There's lots of stuff that we still have to get worked out and get straight for however we're going to do this particular podcast. But I'm pumped. I'm so super pumped because I've done a couple of other podcasts. I do a couple of other podcasts today. And I've never done one about the Bucs. And I'm so excited for this particular podcast. Now, one thing I have to tell you is, just so you know, I'm not a fan of being by myself in a podcast. I always just think it's a little weird, honestly, and a little boring. If I'm the only person out here, it's like I'm literally just talking to myself. It's always much more fun to have somebody else who's with you that you can talk back and forth with, get some good discussion in. Maybe you agree, maybe you actually disagree. I think sometimes when you have somebody sitting across the table from you or on the other end of a phone line when you're doing a podcast and they disagree with you, it's actually it makes for a more fun podcast, not only to record and to discuss, but also for you guys as the listeners. So. And for you guys to interact. So this would normally be a part of the show right about now where I would bring on the guest. But I don't have a guest because it's just me. This is, like I say, really just the introduction episode. But I'm going to be looking for one. And honestly, I have no clue who I'm going to get because I don't actually know a whole lot of other Bucs fans where I live. So I'm kind of alone, like in my own little circle, you know? And this is really the one part of the podcast I have no clue at this point in time how I'm going to make this work. How, maybe one of you guys listening can pop on. That'd be kind of neat. Or maybe I could be cool, get maybe some of the real media guys, like those guys from Pewter Report or, I don't know who else they got, the DraftKings guys, I guess, or the SB Nation, or I know Old School over But the Buck often has Sean King on his show, former Buccaneer player. So I don't know, maybe I can get some of them. I have no clue if I could ever do that. I have zero connection to those people, so I know it could be fun. But for right now, we have no guest, so you're stuck with me. Sorry, that's just kind of how that goes. So. That's what's going on for how all this works. So in today's episode, let's preview it just a little bit. Like I said, this is not going to be your typical show. To really kind of get things going, we're going to talk a little bit about why do we need another podcast? Why do we need one that's focused on the Bucs? Why is this just the perfect time, I think, to start a new Buccaneers podcast? And then in a later segment, I'm going to actually rank my top 5 outlets to get Buccaneers info. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll close out episode 00 with talking about what's next since the season really doesn't start for like 3 more months. So stick around, guys. We'll be right back with the show. Well, guys, welcome back. Like I said, my name is Brent Allen. I will be your host. This is the Pewter Cast, and this is episode 00. And I thought really for this segment today, we could just talk about this podcast. That's what this whole episode is about. I'm getting this going and just kind of detailing out some of those things. So guys, I got to tell you, I am super excited for this podcast. I am 100%. I can't believe that I get to do this. Which is kind of weird because I'm just doing it. I've got a microphone. I've got a recorder, I've got a computer, and we're just going to make it happen. But like I mentioned at the top of the show, I am a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. I'm proud of it. I love my Tampa Bay Bucks, and I don't live in Tampa. I live in South Carolina. This is Panther country where I am, the stinking Panthers. And down the road is the Atlanta Falcons. There's several Falcons people here in the area. It's mostly Panthers. Before here, I was up in Lexington, Kentucky, which is a cool city. Love that town. It's my hometown. It's where I was born and raised. And Lexington is, really the closest people are the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals. But I am a Bucs fan no matter where I go. I love the Bucs. Have been a Bucs fan for now going on about 18 years. And so here's the thing. I like to follow news about what's happening with the Bucs. I like anything that's really coming out concerning the Bucs. I don't really care much for the other teams, to tell you the truth. I'm not one of these guys that sits around and watches football all day long on Saturday for college and then turns around and watches it all day long on Sunday. I look for the Bucs game. I watch the Bucs game, and that tends to be it. And I'll put football on in the background, or if I've got some other stuff going on, or if I have literally nothing else to do, I'll watch football. I like football. I love the game. I played it in high school, but I'm a Bucs fan, and when I watch football, I want to watch the Bucs. When I read up on teams, I don't care what's going on other teams. I don't care what's happening with their players. I don't care what's happening with their salary cap situation. I don't care what's going on with their stadium renovations. I care about ours. I care about our guys. So I sit back and I look at sites like JoeBucksFan.com and Pewter Report and Bucs Nation, and also looking at the other podcast out there, the What the Buck podcast. And, all of those sites have their different niche. They have their different perspective. Some of them are, actual media. Some of them just kind of aggregate stuff. And hopefully this podcast gives you guys something different. Hopefully this gives you, the fans who are so hardcore that you're listening to me, a hack fringe media jockey, talk about my thoughts and my opinions on what's happening with the Bucs and what's going on over at One Buck Place and on the field during games and in the locker room when we get glimpses into what's going on there. But I am just a fan, and I'm so excited for this podcast because what it basically means is it's another avenue for Bucs fans, whether you're in Tampa or if, like me, you're outside of Tampa. It just gives us just another rallying point, just something that has more to do with our team. And we now get to do that. So why do we need another Bucs podcast? Really, the short answer is because there's not enough. I wholeheartedly believe this. There is just not enough podcasts. There's not enough radio coverage. There's just not enough information coming out about the Bucs. And, if you're like me and you kind of consume all things Bucs media that you possibly can, you have the nightly Buccaneers Insiders radio show that you can listen to. You've got the press conferences and the player interviews that you can listen to on Buccaneers.com. Then you've got really the great websites and media outlets that I've already mentioned. Really, there's only one podcast that's by the fans, and that's the What the Buck podcast. And I'll get to Bucs Brief in a few. I know that they're out there. We'll talk about that in a minute. But really, it's the only one that's out there. We have one. Y'all, we just have one. I don't understand that. Like, I've gone around and I've looked. I just can't find them. Maybe there's others out there. I hope there are. I've just not been able to find them. And, guys, I think it's great to be able to hear from the media guys. Honestly, sometimes they can be a little limited in what they talk about and how they talk about things and what they put out there. But really, I want to engage with other Bucs fans. I don't want to have to watch those kinds of things. I want to talk about the things that we care about as fans and not have to have the restrictions that are placed on us as far as what we can and can't talk about and things that may come back to bite. If we're like a real media place, we put something out there and then it could come back and bite us in the butt. Because we have an advantage in the fringe media world. We have an advantage in the podcasting world. And that's that we don't have any sponsors we really have to worry about very often. No one is questioning my credibility. I'm a guy with a microphone and a recorder and a computer, and I'm talking and putting this stuff out there. That's it. And while that can certainly have its problems from a content standpoint and from a trustworthiness standpoint, I really get that because you guys don't know me and I don't really know you. Hopefully we get to know each other. That'd be really cool, I think. But I do think that it gives us something refreshing. I think it gives us a really refreshing amount of freedom just to be honest as fans. The fact is that we can say something on one show and then later in another show completely change our minds about it, and it's okay. Like, it's permitted. Like, that's part of what it is to be a fan. Like, you may think that when Lovie Smith got fired earlier this year that was the dumbest, most asinine move that they could possibly have, and you might have gotten out on one show and talked about that. And then a couple weeks later, as you continued to think about it a little bit more, as things sort of rolled around, maybe even before they actually hired Dirk Cutter as the new head coach, maybe you kind of sat back and go, actually that's probably the right move. Especially as Jason Light came out and he talked a little bit about what was going on there, and maybe even you heard a little bit about what some of the Glazer families had to say. So that's just an example of where I say, we can actually change our minds, and we don't have to go back and backtrack all these things, and we don't have to edit ourselves now for fear of how things may change down the future. So I love that about the fact that we can do this. I think of Scott Smith, who's the senior writer over at Buccaneers.com. Now, I've never met the guy, and he seems like a pretty mild-mannered chap. Real even kill. Doesn't seem like you can get him too worked up over things, but there are times when I'm watching him on his video, his Insiders Live video, where I swear he just wishes he could lose his ever-loving mind over what's happening over at One Buck Place. But he can't. He has to stay unbiased in his reporting of the events there. He actually works for the Buccaneers organization, and he has to kind of keep things even kill. And there's things he can't talk about because he is like the official voice for the Buccaneers when it comes to the website. And so I think he would just like to lose his mind sometimes, but he can't because he is like real media and we're not. So I think it's really best advantage to having this podcast. And so this podcast is going to be one of freedom. And I just don't think there's enough of that for fans to not only consume, but also to interact and engage with. Look, we're all Tampa Bay fans. We all love our team. We love the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we're our own little community no matter where I go. I'm proud of that. I love running into Bucs fans outside of Tampa. You see somebody with a pirate flag and like, go Bucs, and they turn around and look at you and go, arg, and it's amazing and it's awesome. And you go, we're so rare. And, I love getting to interact with people, and hopefully that's really what we get to do. So now what's going to be different about this show? What's going to set the show apart? Well, first of all, let me start by saying that I think the Old School over at What the Buck podcast is doing an incredible job. And you guys should have already subscribed to his show, and you should be listening every week when he comes out with stuff. He's kind of on a break right now in the off season, but when he's in season, you should just be listening to his stuff. It's a fantastic show. But this is going to be a different show. For one thing, I have no plans of live broadcasting this show like he does over at What the Buck. It's just not me. And honestly, it's a little above my pay grade when it comes to the technology that is required to do that in podcasting. I'm sure I could figure it out. It doesn't seem like it's that hard, but I'm just not going to go there. And truthfully, I like the freedom of kind of being able to record whenever I want and then take the time to edit the show if I have to, and then be able to go back and actually post it and have it come out when it's ready, and not have this kind of live thing that's going on. So also, I got to tell you, I'm probably not going to be getting the coach's film and watching that. I'm probably not sitting down to watch the game 3 or 4 times before I record the podcast. I'm not breaking down too many stat lines, I don't think, or anything like that. I'm just going to be talking about what I saw as I watched the game, and hopefully the guests that I'll have with me at that point we'll also be talking about what they saw as they watched the game and how we kind of interpreted that as fans and what that means in the context of the storyline of what's actually happening over the season. We'll be talking about what's happening in the headlines that's commenting on that. You guys remember there was kind of seemed to be this undercurrent last year of this rift that was developing between Gerald McCoy and Jameis Winston over, the old leader and the new leader of the team. And, that kind of got squashed pretty hard after the season was over. And turns out it wasn't anything like that. Like, there was this picture of Gerald McCoy kind of like brooding outside the circle and not really listening to Jameis. And Gerald comes on later and he's like, Yeah, like I was just praying for the team because I do that like before every game. Like I was praying that everybody would stay safe and not get hurt. So, it's so how do we talk about that? Like those are kind of some of the things that hopefully we'll see those and we'll get to comment and talk about it and, maybe get to the bottom of it or dig it out and see what happens. So, one of the other things we get to talk about is just kind of our hopes for the team. Maybe we'll preview a couple of games and mostly guys, we're just cheering on the Bucs as diehard fans. That's really what we're doing. Now, that said, we'll have segments on this show that won't just be what happened in the game. We'll have some fun discussion segments that we as Tampa Bay fans would have in a bar or on Facebook. So that'll be going on. We'll rank topics. That's always fun. It always centers around some good discussion. You rank things, or you'll do like a top 3 list, or that kind of fun stuff that fans just naturally do. So those will be kind of the 2 main segments that we know about right now. Usually then we'll close out the show with, just kind of some of the news of what's going on. Maybe we'll do previews, like I said, of the next week. But who knows? That last segment may really change week to week, depending on how the show goes and what we've already covered earlier in the week or earlier in that episode. So I don't know. We'll do that. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with the podcast. Who am I? That's probably something to talk about just for a little bit. So it's always good to know who your host is, a little bit about where he's coming from. So first of all, I'll tell you, I am a fan. I'm a Tampa Bay fan. I hope I've made that abundantly clear. I grew up, like I said, in Lexington, Kentucky. We were about an hour and change away from Cincinnati. There in the 80s. I grew up in a home without a father. And so there was nothing in my life that pointed me towards football, that said I should watch football or help me understand what I was watching. So I didn't really grow up loving football. And, it was Bengals territory. Like, I didn't really love it. I got into high school, eventually started playing football and began understanding what football was like, started understanding the game and kind of peeked in, but I never really had a team I could call my own. My junior year of high school, we moved to Orlando, Florida, and still was there, and then graduated high school that next year, and wound up going to college in the Tampa area. Went to college in Clearwater. I was there in 1998, which you great Tampa Bay fans, like that was right after they changed the uniforms. Raymond James Stadium had just opened, and the team was really on the up and up. And I was there for 4 years, and what can I say? I caught the bug. And that's how I became a Bucs fan, was I was right there kind of in the golden age of Bucs history. And I've been a fan now, so since 1998. So this is 2016, so 18 years. Holy cow, it does not seem like that long. But I've been a fan of this team. I love this team, and it's certainly been a roller coaster. Been all the way up to 2002 when we won the Super Bowl, and since then it's just been this, oh my gosh, this wave of, oh no, we suck again, and hey, we actually might do pretty good. Oh no, we suck again, and I think we're on the up and up. I really do. But I say that every season. But I really honestly believe that. I think it's going to be there. So that's who I am. I'm a Bucs fan. Second thing you should know about me, I've already mentioned it, is I don't live in Tampa, and man, it's lonely. It's lonely as a Bucs fan. Like, there's very few people that I get to go. I'll go out to like a sports bar or something here on a Sunday, and I'm the only one looking for the Bucs game. If somebody else is watching that game, it's usually because they're a fan of the other team that we're playing that particular week. That's life for what it is to be a Bucs fan who doesn't live in Tampa. And if anyone out there is listening and you live in the upstate region of South Carolina and you want to hang out and watch the game at a bar somewhere, shoot me an email. Give me a call. I'd love to. I'd love to meet some other fans. I love getting to hang out with you guys. So, somehow we have to connect as fans. And somehow we have to have a way to talk about our team. And this podcast is really the way for me to do it. And this is a podcast, as I said, by a fan for fans that are out there. And, I really want to have some of you guys on this show, come in for an episode and go through the whole course of the episode and talk about Tampa with us and talk about what's going on. So it's a little bit about that. I am in my mid-30s. I have a wife, I have kids, all that other normal stuff. I'm sure all that kind of stuff will come up from time to time as the show goes on. As far as a job, I'm actually a stay-at-home dad most of the week. which is very cool. We're in a situation that puts us fortunate enough that I get to stay home with the kids while they are young. I've got a 3-year-old who's almost 4, and then I've got a 10-month-old who's almost 11 months. So my wife and I made it a priority in our family that one of us would stay home, and turns out I drew the short straw. And then at night, I'm kind of a part-time amateur, not so amateur because I am getting paid, which is awesome, comedian. Don't be thinking I'm going to be bringing a whole lot of jokes into the show. It's not, but that is something I get to do. What do I have to offer? Why would you ever want to listen to me? And I would just say this, because I love the Bucs, and I think I've got some pretty clear thoughts on the Bucs as a football team, as an organization, on what it means to be a fan, on what are some of the things that they really need to do to be successful. Because I came in when they were successful, when they were going there. That was kind of my start with the Bucs, and I remember those attitudes and what was going on in those times. So that's really what's going on, and that's why, because I'm gonna be one of the few putting content out there. There's according to my reckoning, this will be only the second Bucs podcast out there. So you really don't have many other choices, which might be a piss poor reason for you guys to be listening, but whatever. So what about it? Why now? Why do I think this is the right time to launch this podcast? Well, that's a good question. I'm really glad you asked, because as I'm recording this, today's date is April 25th, 2016, and if you are a Bucs podcast listener, you probably know that there has only been 2 real podcasts out there, at least ones that I've been able to find. One of them I've mentioned a couple times is the What the Buck podcast. The other one is the Bucs Brief podcast, and I got to tell you guys just a little bit about my background with this. Is I first had an inkling to do a Bucs-related podcast last year during training camp, during the 2015 training camp. So I got into iTunes to see what other people were doing, and I was really shocked at the lack of available content out there. I mean, it was really just these 2 guys. There was a couple of other things. There's some older podcasts that had kind of since gone defunct and not really updated. But as far as actually like a legitimate podcast that you'd want to listen to, there was just the 2. It was the What the Buck and Bucs Brief. So I kind of got on and started listening to them to see what they did. And, I said, they're really already doing a great job, especially the Bucs Brief guy. He was doing everything that I would, at the time, have wanted to do as a Bucs podcaster. And I'm not really sure that I would have had much to add to the conversation at the time. So I just kind of let them take it and, really enjoyed the podcast that they put out. But this morning, today, we, and by we, I mean us as a podcast listening Buccaneer fan audience, got some pretty bummed out news, and that was that Chris over at Bucs Brief was shutting down his podcast like immediately. And I, for one, was really sad about this. I really was. Chris, if you happen to be listening to this, man, we're gonna miss you in the podcast community. I really, really liked your show. I looked forward to your show every single Wednesday morning when I could download it to my phone, and I could hear what you had to say, and whoever your guest was, could kind of hear you break down the game from several days before. I always thought that Chris had brought some much needed calmness and reality to whatever was happening in Buccaneer land that week. Alas, he's not doing it anymore. And I understand his reasoning. I really do. If you guys haven't listened to it, go over there, listen to it. He'll tell you why. And honestly, I've had to make similar decisions with my own career path. I really have. And what Chris has done, I can tell you guys, is he's traded in what was good for something that's even better. And I applaud him for that decision. I really do. I wholeheartedly applaud him for that. I know it wasn't an easy decision either. But, in a situation like this, we're fans of the NFL, and the NFL is a next man up type league. If someone goes down, the game's got to go on, and it's next man up. And so that's why I'm jumping in now. There's a bit of a void, I think, that's been left by the Bucs Brief podcast. His podcast was not the same as the What the Buck. They were very similar in style, but they were still very different. And so, What the Buck is continuing to go. But I think there's a little bit of a void. I'm going to attempt to fill some of that void with Bucs Brief going off the air. I'm going to hope to fill it. Now, that said, I feel like I should make this perfectly clear. This will not be the Bucs Brief podcast reborn. I'm not Chris. I'm not going to be like Chris. I can only be me and do the podcast the way that I would do it. So I don't want to hear the comparisons. I can hear that. Oh, well, I liked how over at Bucks Brief they would do it like this. And you know what? I probably did too. I probably really liked the way that they did that. But this is something new, and I'm just not even going to be listening to stuff like that. I'm not going to be hearing it. So just leave it alone. This is something that is new. This is something that is different. And I say that just so you guys don't expect the same format or the same type of content to happen, because it's not going to. It's going to be its own unique type of podcast, and in that way, like I say, we kind of fill some of that void. Really, hopefully, my goal is that this podcast will wind up standing on its own right next to those two podcasts as one of the best Buccaneer fan podcasts out there. I'm not sure that I can say podcast any more in one sentence than I just did. It's probably true. So, and that's why I'm doing this show. It's for you, the fans, and it's a show by a fan. It's a little bit for me. It's a lot for you guys. We can only all win by doing that. All right, guys. Well, hey, listen, I'm going to take a break for just a minute, get a drink. You guys stay tuned. Coming up next, I'm going to rank my top 5 sites for getting Bucks-related info. So stay tuned. Hey, 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 teach me how to do it, hey. Baby like smooth, what? Can you teach me how to do it? You know why? Cause all the girls love me, hey. All I need is a beat that's super bumpin', and for you to back it up and dump it, get it. Put your arms out front, lean side to side. They gon' be on you when they see you hit that Dougie ride. Well, teach me how to Dougie. Little shout out to Doug Martin, the Dugginator, muscle hamster. We're not supposed to call him that anymore. Hey, listen, you may have noticed that I've not done any of the usual podcasty stuff, like here's our Twitter, or here's our Facebook, or here's how you can interact with us. And really, that's because I don't have any of that stuff set up yet. And by the time you listen to this, hopefully, all of that stuff will be set up. So please, go on over to Twitter and follow us, or shoot us a tweet, ask us a question, give us some feedback. Same thing over at Facebook. And for whenever this makes its way over to iTunes, please leave us a review. It'll really help other Buck fans just like you find us. And when you leave us an iTunes review, it pushes us up in the ranks, and you get to, in that way, you're kind of sharing the Pewter Cast with everyone out there who else is a fan. So thanks in advance for listening to the show, showing your support for everything we have going on over here at Pewter Cast. It really is all very, very helpful. And you guys are awesome. I hear the squad screaming like, hey, get it, Brody. So I move my shoulders and I take it real low. They like how we do that. He can Dougie on the floor. And when your boys stop, they like Dougie some more. I'm like, your boy kind of tired, and I pass it to the bro. And boom. Show these cats how to do it. All right, and we're back. This is the Pewter Cast, and this is episode 00. For this segment, we're going to be ranking our top 5 Bucks info media outlets. Now, should any of these guys ever happen to listen to this, please know that I am very high on all of these outlets. It's just, in a ranking, somebody has to go number 5, and somebody's going to be number 1. That's the nature of a ranking. But I want to make this clear. I do think that all of these outlets are outlets that you should be following, if you're not already. I think you should read them all. I'd highly recommend them. So without further ado, here we go. For my criteria this week, I took a look really at how faithful I am to checking their content and how quickly I am to consume that content. You can check it and just kind of go, yeah, I'm not really going to read, not going to read. But how much I'm really going to dive in and just consume what they have to offer as their content. I also took a look at how eager I'm to get to that particular type of content. Like they may put it out, and I'm just being like, yeah, I could read that later. Maybe I'll read it today. And sometimes I'm like just waiting for it to come out. Like I know it's coming, and I keep waiting. So I kind of took that into account as I was kind of setting these up. And then also just, I went ahead and threw out press conferences and locker room interviews, mostly because that kind of stuff is like the raw source of information, and questions and answers are supposed to be quick and to the point. And this ranking is really about what we do with that info. This ranking is about the media outlets and how we find out about stuff about the Bucks and what's going on, and actually, solidifying that, and not just having it be some raw emotion coming out of a locker room or some kind of trumped up answer in a press conference. So that's kind of the criteria that I have. And with that said, my number 5 is going to be bucksnation.com. Now, that's part of the SB Nation series of websites. And this website is really just kind of one that just goes out there and just reports the news. There's no emotion one way or the other. They're usually one of the first ones to come out with it. So for something quick and light and that's just the facts and that's up to date, there's not a whole lot of speculation that's going on over there. That's where you want to go. And so for that reason, I really enjoy that one. So number 5 on my list is bucksnation.com. Number 4 is joebucksfan.com. I like this website. I like this website a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. This is one where they will hear reports, they'll see something in a press conference, they'll hear something from somebody else on another team altogether, and they dig out this little nugget, this little innuendo of what they were saying, and they piece different pieces of information, and they pump out content like crazy. I mean, it just, in a single day, they could come up with 10 new posts. And so often their posts are amusing. Whether you agree with them or you disagree with their take, they certainly have their own thoughts and opinions, and they let it be known. Like right now, one of the drums they're just banging is to trade Glennon, trade Glennon, trade Glennon. Oh, wait, maybe we're not. His draft stock's going down. Or not his draft stock, his trade stock is going down with some of the changes that just happened in the draft where people are changing spots. So also, their articles are short, which means you can read through like a ton of them super quick and stay up to date. So I really like that website. You guys should definitely check it out, joebucksfan.com. That's my number 4. Number 3 is pewterreport.com. I like to look at Pewter Report and kind of think, outside of like the official Buccaneers.com website, this is probably the most reputable, faithful one that's out there. Particularly if you're not, reading the Tampa Tribune or, this is just the most reputable, trustworthy, I guess, news source that comes out. The content is a lot more predictable in terms of schedule posts and series they run with. Like they're gonna, at the end of each game, they're gonna talk about their defensive winners and their offensive winners, and then the losers. And Scott Reynolds has his SR's Fab 5 that comes out every Friday, which really breaks down all the nitty gritty. I will just tell you that the Fab 5 is so long, which is really what keeps it from being something that I jump at as soon as it comes out, because it's going to take me a while to get through it. It's just a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of words, and it's a lot of information, and that's really what kind of keeps it at number 3 on my list here. But they do have the new Pewter Pulse, which is a video series, which is where they're kind of doing the same thing. They're talking about, they're discussing things that are happening around the Bucs, and it's good info. Great discussion happens. It's really good to watch it, but you have to commit to watching the video. I really hope that they start pulling the audio off of that video and just posting that as a podcast. It really wouldn't take that much effort. They just rip the audio out, throw it up on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever they have podcasting stuff, and that can become their podcast. I really hope they do that, but so they have that. So pewterreport.com makes my number 3. All right, moving on. Number 2, I've talked about this a few times already, but it's What the Buck podcast. Now, I promise I'm not sucking up to old school. I'm really not. But personally, I'd rather listen to information than read it or watch videos. The thing with videos is you actually have to watch them. When something's just in audio form, I can be getting ready in the morning, I can be driving, I can be, sweeping the house, I can be working in the garage, I could be out in the yard. I can be doing any of those things with audio. With video, I actually got to, sit down and watch it, and plus it just eats up phone battery like nobody else's business. So for all of that makes What the Buck podcast my number 2 for getting Buck info and opinions and analysis of what's going on out there. Old School, the host, he's fun to listen to. He brings up a lot of good points, and he really adds a lot of sanity to what we often see from the ridiculousness that is just the mass fans on social media. So I love that one over there. And for my number 1 media outlet for Buccaneers info and news and whatever's going out there, the one I really love the most is the Buccaneers Insiders nightly radio show, the one they do during the season with the coaches and the players. I love listening to that one. This is one of those, I very rarely listen to it live because we've got other stuff going on. I think they usually do it at like 7 o'clock at night, which is like bedtime for my kids, and I'm upstairs with them. But I will listen to this just as soon as they release it, later that night or the next day. I love listening. I love listening to our coaches. I love listening to our players and getting to hear them. And I know what you're thinking. You're saying, well, Brent, you threw out the press conferences. You threw out the locker room interviews. What makes this different? It kind of seems like you're cheating. And maybe I am. Maybe I'm cheating a little bit. But here's what's different for me about this from the press conferences. When you see the press conferences, particularly the ones right after the games or the ones in the locker room, the players and coaches have had some time by the time they get to the radio show to cool off from the game. And they've had a chance to look at the game films themselves. They've had a chance to digest it. And once they've had a chance to do that, they can actually come back and talk to you a little bit more about what's going on. Now, sure, they're still a little bit more guarded about what they're going to say, but it really gives you just an amazing insight into the mind of the coaches and the players and gives them really a chance to talk about what happened. And truthfully, who better to hear about what happened than from the people who are actually on the Flargan field at the time? And it gives you amazing insight into the mind of the coaches and players, like I said. And also you kind of get a glimpse into their personal lives, which is kind of cool. Another added benefit to the radio show I like is that you can live tweet in a question, and they usually will answer it. It's like they somehow get to them. I've had a few get on, so that's always fun. So my number one is Buccaneers Insider, the nightly radio show. For my number one. And as far as honorable mentions, I like honorable mentions. I can't go out there and not throw out Buccaneers.com, particularly with Scott Smith and Casey Phillips for what they're doing out there. I really don't mean to shaft them. It's just the thing about is it's the official Buccaneers website. And so the stuff that they come out is either delayed, we've already heard about it from somewhere else, or it has all the polish and the cleaning of what it is to be the official Bucs announcement of things. It doesn't kind of give you the fan-based analysis of it, but it is a good place to go. Certainly, if you want anything confirmed, that's the one to go to. I like following Greg Allman and Rick Stroud on Twitter. There's some of the local newspaper guys there in Tampa, and they can give you some good news and some good things. And generally, if you tweet them back, they'll interact with you a bunch. I'd say the same thing about Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter, except they don't interact with you back. But they certainly have an inside track. I get both of their tweets to my phone, and I'm always just scanning it for Bucs news, which is very rare, but it happens sometimes. That's how I found out about Lovie getting fired, honestly. I do like the NFL mobile app on my phone. You can pick your teams, and I've got the Bucs set up as the team on that one, so I can just kind of go. It's a lot of the same stuff that's on the BucsNation.com website or things that you've already seen, but it's still a good place to go for around the league type news. And for my last honorable mention, I'm going to throw out the Buccaneers players, like their personal Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts. That's just a fantastic place if you really want to get to know the players themselves and see what they're thinking and kind of what's going on. It's really great. Right now you're getting a lot of them they're in the gym, they're working out, and they're getting pumped, and they're getting back into it, and those are just fun to follow. So I couldn't put up SportsCenter or ESPN or anything like that because really they don't cover the Bucs at all. So, yeah, maybe if they start covering the Bucs, I'll put them up there next time. So those are my top 5 places to get Bucs-related news coverage, and this is the part where I would normally say, if you agree or disagree with me or have another place where you like to get info from, please shoot me a message on Twitter or Facebook, whatever those accounts will be. Drop me a line at an email, which I'm sure will probably be something like the pewtercast@gmail.com or just Pewter Cast. I don't know. I'll bet Twitter will end up being at Pewter Cast, and Facebook will be facebook.com/PewterCast. It's probably the way to work out. That's what I would do if I could. And once again, just a reminder, please be sure to leave a review on iTunes whenever this gets up on iTunes. All right, well, I guess that's going to do it for this segment. Coming up next is going to be what's next for this podcast. We'll talk about that. Stay tuned. Hey. It's Brent Allen, host of the show. Do you want to be a sponsor? I mean, this would be a great place to advertise to Buccaneers fans, don't you think? I think so. This is a good spot. It's deep in the podcast. People are listening. It's now a break from the show just a little bit. And I got to tell you guys, I know we're going to be getting thousands upon thousands upon thousands of listeners, or maybe tens upon tens. I'm not really sure. But who really knows? I don't know. This is just episode 00. But hey, listen, if you're listening to this and you're interested in becoming a sponsor, whether you've got your own podcast of your own or you just want to sponsor some stuff that you think people that listen to a podcast about Buccaneers would also be interested in, if you're interested, just drop me a line and let's talk about you becoming a sponsor of the show. We'd love to have that conversation with you. All right, guys, and I'm back. This is Brent Allen, your host. This is the Pewter Cast, episode 00, and this is our final segment for this episode. All right, guys, we're almost there, so stay with me. All right, guys, typically this is where we're going to take a look at what's going on with the Bucs in the news, with the headlines that are coming out, and maybe we'll try to bring some levity to it or even insert some clear-headed, logical thinking about what's happening with our beloved Buccaneers. Or maybe we'll do something completely different in this segment from week to week. I'm really not sure. Got to be honest with you. I'm just not sure. You know, it really just kind of depends on how the headlines go from week to week, as the storyline of the season unfolds, which is kind of neat. You know, it also talks about how it's also going to depend on how much we've already talked about those headlines up to this point in each episode, but since this is episode 00, I thought I'd just kind of talk about, talk out loud for a little bit and kind of muse on what really could be next for this show. Because, the truth is the season at the point of this recording, or at least the preseason is like 3 months away. Are we putting out the podcast now? I don't know. So the first thing I think that's next not the first thing, just a thing. The first thing I'm going to talk about is needing to get guests and maybe a co-host for the show. That's going to be something that I think that has to happen. Like I said earlier, I'd really like from time to time to be able to get some of these real media guys to call in and give us their take on what's happening. Maybe Mark Cook, who was so generous with Chris over at Bucs Brief, or someone like that could call in, and they may not be able to stay for the entire episode, and that'd be fine. But, at least they could call in during the main segment and just give us some insight into what's happening, or maybe even call in during this segment, actually, and tell us what's happening. So it should be interesting in trying to make that happen. I'm not really sure how that's going to work, but I got to tell you, though, more than that, though, and as cool as those guys are going to be, more than that, I'm really hoping to find other Bucs fans who are not only as passionate about the team as I am, but who also want to talk about it and who are interesting to talk to. I think that's probably a big thing. I want people who are interesting to talk to. So I'll be on the lookout for those. I'm hesitant to say if you want to be on the podcast, give me a call, because that could just go down south real quick. But, I guess I'll at least throw it out there. There's no really other way to meet people than just to give them a shot, right? And it's pretty, technology being what it is, we'll be able to get you in. I've always had this thought. Here's something I've never understood. Why is it when you're watching football and you see the commentators and the commentators are wearing suits? Like, seriously, why are they wearing suits? Like, there is nobody in those stands except for maybe the owners in the owners' boxes who are wearing suits. There's nobody sitting at home wearing a suit. We're all wearing jerseys. And I think that those commentators, that's the other thing. Those commentators are kind of, they're emotionless when it comes to the game. They're just out there talking. Like, what if we could do this? What if instead of that, you had maybe the one guy in the middle who's like the moderator of the whole thing, but then you had one guy who's like an uber Bucs fan. And then you had another guy who's like an uber fan of whatever team we're facing that week. And you just let those guys kind of go at it. You just let them talk trash to each other. You let them just keep talking about why they think their team's the best. And I think that would make for a much more interesting broadcast feed on TV. It could get really annoying. I don't know. But that being said, maybe from week to week, I could find somebody. I might actually have more luck with this. Could find somebody who is a fan of the opposing team and bring them on, and we'll just kind of, have at it and kind of go back and forth with some good banter. That could probably make for a really good show, I think. I really think it could. So that'll be something I'm looking at, guest, co-host for the show. Something else is really this. Until preseason starts, I'm not sure how often we're going to be putting out an episode. That's just the truth. I really don't, which is kind of sad. Kind of feels like maybe I'm a little bit more premature with doing this podcast. But, at the time of this recording, the 2016 draft is 3 days away. It is April 26th. Actually, it's, I guess, 2 days away now. The clock just flipped over midnight. It is the 26th right now, and the draft happens on the 28th. And as we all know, there's really not much going on right now except for mock draft after mock draft after mock draft after mock draft after mock draft. And oh my God, I hate mock drafts. I really do. I hate them. I hate mock drafts. You know why? Because they're never right. They're never right. They don't know. Too many things could happen. Teams could trade. They could go up. They could go down. Somebody could fall and lose a toe. You could have a team just completely decide to not draft at their pick, and then the time expires, and then other teams jump up real quick. That's happened, not infrequently. If I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't love college football that much. I really don't. I don't know much about these players who are in the draft. And truthfully, I'm content just to wait and see who we draft, and then let's get to know those guys. That's kind of my take on it. I'm not out there trying to figure out who all's in the draft and who the top 10 people are and try to get to know all those guys. I don't really care. I want to know, listen, once we draft our guys, then let's figure out who we've got. Honestly, Jason Light, he went to a D3 Hobart college and got us Ali Marpet. Nobody knew who Ali Marpet was, and Jason Light may do something similar to that again. So, but you just don't know what's going to happen. So let's wait and see what happens once the guys get the draft, and then we can talk about that. So maybe that could be an episode. But then, we're going to have a really big lull again. And yes, I know there's going to be activity happening at One Buck Place. There's going to be pre-camps and mini camps and camp itself, and, there's going to be press conferences, and there's going to be lots of this stuff. But truthfully, I don't know how much of it's actually going to give us enough fodder for a podcast. Now certainly once we get to the season, to at least the preseason, then we've got weekly games, except for the bye week. We've got weekly games, so we should be good to go from there till the end of the season. And honestly, probably by the end of the season, I could use a break from doing the show. But I don't know for the next couple of months exactly how we're doing it. So I think maybe the best way to do it is just to sort of record some random episodes, like when good news pops up, and just kind of save it all like a little backlog. And then once the season starts, then we can go ahead and actually launch the podcast on iTunes. Like that might, I think, be the best way, and then you just kind of put up this backlog of episodes that you've already had recorded of content. So it kind of looks like we've been there a little bit longer, but we really just started on iTunes. And I don't even know if iTunes will let you do that. I don't know how much content they'll let you post like right away once you get started, but that way maybe we can get into that new and noteworthy section in the podcast. That'd be kind of neat. I can't imagine why they don't let you just put up a backlog. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. But we'll figure that out when we get there. So, but I got to say, by the time you guys listen to this, we're already going to be rolling full tilt with the show, and none of this conversation will matter. That just now occurs to me. But it's okay. It's fun talking about it right now. So, I guess something else is we'd better look at getting like a logo and theme music and, the website and Facebook page, and probably going to have to get, a podcast hosting, lip-sync or something like that. Libsyn is the website that does all that. Twitter account, email address, if I have it my way, it's just going to be Pewter Cast at Pewter Cast, Facebook, Pewter Cast at gmail.com. I'm going to go Gmail because I like them and they're free. So maybe even a phone number, maybe get like a little Google number for people to call in and leave voicemails on. That'd be kind of neat. So hopefully all that'll be coming. And you guys that are listening to this, we'll really never have to worry about it. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's really what's up. I think over the next little bit, we'll probably focus on doing shows when news comes out instead of like trying to push a weekly show. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to do it. Don't you guys? Don't you agree? I think that's probably good. So, all right, guys. Well, hey, listen. I think that's gonna do it. I think that's gonna do it for episode 00. Now, this episode this was the very first time we've recorded. We're kind of doing things. I'm kind of doing things a little more hodgepodge than I normally would with a podcast, and trying to do a couple of different things at once. So, if I got into places where I started talking really fast, I apologize. I'm trying to slow down so that you can understand me and things aren't just going, 100 miles a minute. And stick with me, guys. I'm really glad to have you. We'll get a co-host and guest in here, and that'll sharpen things up quite a bit as well. But guys, until then, thanks for joining me. Please go figure out wherever we are on social media or Facebook by the time you listen to this. Leave us reviews. It helps out so much with other people, getting to know us and finding us out there on the web, so they can know what's happening with us. And would just really love to have all that support. So guys, here's to a great run. I think hopefully a long run of a podcast that we have going on. You guys check it out, and we'll see you next time on the Pewter Cast.